all across the city, there were young Republican clubs. And Dad was on the north side and I was on the south side. We never would have met if it wasn't for that convention, because we were from opposite ends of the city. And so another gal who I worked with, her name was Joan. She was also, we were together in this Young Republican Club, and we were going to go to this convention. It was very exciting. It was a very big deal. And the biggest part of the deal for me was that I was going to be in the contest for Miss Young Republican, a beauty contest of all things. So that was the big deal for me going to this convention. And so came time for the beauty contest, and I'd walk down this ramp, and at the end of the ramp there was my group. Everybody I knew was right at the end, and they were cheering and, you know, like carrying on. And it was so much fun. So the first time I went down there, they all were cheering and cheering. And then it was either the second time or the third time, I don't remember how many times there were, I'm coming down that ramp again, and here's this guy in the middle of my friends. And I'm thinking to myself, who the heck is that? You know, because he's not from our club. So later, I did not become Miss Young Republican, by the way, but it was fun being in the contest. So I was on a date. I was with somebody that night for that whole thing. And at one point, Gary or Jerry was his name. He went off to get a drink. And then this boy who I didn't know, this man, comes up and introduces himself to me. He says, "Hi, I'm Bob Tietz. I'm a friend of Joan Wangro," which of course was my friend. So I figured, okay, he's got to be okay if he's a friend of Joan's. And so we chit-chatted. Oh, and he said, and so you must work for U.S. Steel too. I said, yeah. And he said, yeah, I know Mr. Logilin. Now, Mr. Logilin was the top man in our building there as far as U.S. Steel. He was the vice president. So was I impressed that he was a friend of him? Yes, of course I was. I was very impressed. Your grandpa, he knew how to impress people. So then that was it. I didn't see him again. And I said to Joan, hey, some guy named Bob Tietz was talking to me. Is he all right? She said, oh yeah, he's vice president of the North Side Young Republican Club. Whoa, that was impressive too. So anyway, it was a very exciting time. In fact, I think he even spoke. I think the president of his club was kind of like running the whole show. So they were both pretty big deals that weekend. It was an overnight thing. It was a Friday night and Saturday event in the hotel. And so it was all very exciting. And that's how I met him. Getting back to the convention, there's one little bit more I want to tell you about Bob telling me that he knew Mr. Logilin and how impressed I was. Because after we were married, Mr. Logilin's secretary, who was a good friend of mine, had a party. So we went to her party, and I introduced him to her, and I said to her, and he knows Mr. Logilin. And she said, oh, I'll be sure to tell him I met you. And then he said, well, actually, I heard him speak once. He never knew Mr. Logilin, but he knew he was a big shot. And so anyway, there you go.
He knew he had to make an impression, and fast.
I guess so. Anyway, that's where I met Dad, and he also worked downtown. Only he was on Michigan Avenue, which was like 6 or 8 blocks away, and he drove to work. I always took the train to work, but he drove to work. And so anyway, first he asked me out on a date. We went to lunch in the restaurant, probably right across the street from my building, only down the street a bit. So we had lunch, and we decided we liked each other, and then he invited me to go on a date. And I said yes, and he said, I'll pick you up on this corner where that man in the blue shirt is standing. I'll pick you up at that corner after work. Great. So I come out of the building across the street. I walk over to that corner where that red car is standing. Right about there is where I was standing. And I said to myself, oh no, he didn't tell me what kind of car he has. And now this is rush hour. And when it's rush hour, every inch of this road is covered with cars. And they're all honking and in a hurry, you know, and stuff like that. So I'm standing there thinking, how in the heck I'm not going to know which car is his. Well, no, that's not true. I certainly did know which car was his, because he pulled up in a red Corvette with the top down, smiling at me, waving. Oh my goodness, I was so surprised. I'd never ridden in a car like that before. But when I got in the car, guess what? I pretended like it didn't matter. It was just another car. I was not impressed, so I pretended anyway. But anyhow, that was my first ride in a red Corvette. And years later, when we were living here in California, Grandpa said to me, I have a question I've been wanting to ask you for a long time. And I said, what's that? He said, did the Corvette have anything to do with it? And I said, you bet it did. Well, Grandpa and I had been dating for all summer. We met in May at that convention I told you about. And now it was about like September, and I don't know if it was bringing me home or picking me up, but we were sitting on the steps just chatting when he asked me to marry him. And I was pretty happy about that. And I said, oh yes, right away. So that's where we got engaged. And we got married in November. So we met in May and we were married in November. That was pretty quick in those days. And it was a long drive for him when we would have a date. He lived on the north side, I lived on the south side. He had to drive down, I forget what street that was, but it was a long drive either way. So lots of times we would have dates after work, you know, and then we'd be in his car and he'd only have to drive from downtown to my place to take me home instead of all the way from his place. So there were 3 bedrooms. So my mom had the front bedroom, Uncle Gus had the middle bedroom, and I had the back bedroom.
This street in Roseland is historic
Yes.
throughout your entire youth. If you could just walk through what we're seeing here.
Okay. So when I started, I had gone to kindergarten in Pullman, but then we moved to Roseland, and now I changed schools and started going to Holy Rosary School. I went there for all 8 years of elementary school, boys and girls, and we didn't have teachers. We had nuns who were Catholic ladies, all dressed in black, long black dresses and black veils. And so we had a different teacher for each grade. And then we had another teacher who was the music teacher. And she taught us songs and things. And she also led the children's choir. When you got to 4th grade, you got to be in the choir at Mass on every day, the weekdays. So that was a big deal to get to sing in the choir. I have mixed emotions about going to school there. They were very strict, a lot of rules, but everything was very strict and you had to behave all the time or you got punished. And so it was kind of a scary place in a way. So it wasn't one of my favorites. And then next door, that was where the nuns lived. And so they all lived right next door there. So they didn't have to go far to go to work, did they? They just walked right next door. And so I was only in there a few times. The music teacher nun was really sweet. We all loved her. She was very nice to us. And sometimes she would have the girls come over, we girls, children, for a special something or other. So she was kind of like our very favorite. That grassy area, that was real special. We had special things that would happen there, special events. Yeah. There was a day for St. Mary. We would all be there. And there's a statue of her, Jesus' mother, back there. And it was a special place to go, quiet place. And then came the big church after that. It was called Holy Rosary Church. And that was the church I went to all the time I was in grammar school and high school, and even after I graduated. And that was where Dad and I got married, inside Holy Rosary Church. Yeah, 1962 in November. It was winter, but it wasn't a bad day. That day that we got married, it was in the 70s and nobody was wearing a coat. And it was a beautiful, beautiful day. Very unusual for November in Chicago. Made us extra happy. Okay, well, here I am with my one true friend who has been with me since the day I was born. This is Brown Jimmy. When I was born, my dad came into the room on the very day and with this wonderful bear in one arm and a dozen roses in the other arm. And my mother was horrified that this bear was so big, because it was way bigger than me. And she said to my dad, "But the bear's too big." And my dad just grinned and said that he's a real bear. And so there he was, and he's always been with me. Everywhere I've moved, everywhere and always, I've had Brown Jimmy with me. And at one point, I had to have him repaired. His head was loose. He had an eye that needed to be replaced. So I took him to this doll store where they fixed dolls. And when I went to pick him up, he was sitting on a shelf. And the lady who owned the store said to me, "I've had so many people want to buy him. Would you consider selling him?" And I said, "No way." So with that, she turned around and she reached up to put him on the counter and give him to me. And when she did, the lady standing there went, "Oh." They thought he was so great. So here I am in California, having a beautiful time living here with Brown Jimmy. And it's been fun talking to you about everything in my life, especially him. So say bye-bye.